on this trek. Today's topic was on Operation Varsity Blues, which is Netflix's newest documentary on the college admissions scandal. We talked about topics like self-worth and the college application process, as well as the systemic issues that manifested the college admissions scandal in the first place. It was a phenomenal conversation, and I absolutely can't wait for you to watch it, so let's go ahead and get right on into it. Hello and welcome everyone. The Trek is a Civics Unplugged series where community members participate in meaningful discussions on topics that are too often neglected when thinking about building the future. Through prompting questions and provocations, we venture together into complex but important conversations related to building the future and democracy. We understand that this work requires ongoing dialogue, but it's a journey worth trekking through. Hello, my name is Mariam. I'm a 17-year-old high school senior from the suburbs of Chicago and a proud builder of the CU community. And today I will be hosting a trek for the first time, but we are joined by some of our wonderful CU community members for a trek on Netflix's recent documentary on the whole college admissions scandal called Operation Varsity Blues. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with the word association. So when you see your name on the screen, feel free to introduce yourselves and then give us 1 to 3 words you associate with the documentary. And so for mine, I will say that mine are somehow not surprising. And then Ashley, we can get started with you.
Awesome. Hey everyone, my name is Ashley Lynn. I'm 17 from Vancouver, Washington. I think my words would just be overly simplistic. It's like, yes, like the scandal like clearly happened, but I just felt like the way that it was presented in the documentary was definitely very like single perspective oriented. And like that was partly because I watched it with my parents, but yeah.
The word association I would associate is no man's land. I felt like it just kind of captured this bizarre difference between the wealth gap.
For sure. And then Jahi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oops. Okay, I'm 17. I'm from Dayton, Ohio.
Hi, I'm Leora. I am 18. I'm a high school senior from right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I guess my words would be all too familiar. I don't know anybody like quite of the level of wealth from the people in the documentary were, but I'm definitely familiar with the kind of very uber competitive college landscape and that they were painting.
Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a high school senior from Verdigris, Oklahoma, and similar to Mariam's, this is not my word association, but I was going to say like not surprising, but I would also say that just this documentary in general kind of rewards the schools, because I caught myself kind of like in my head thinking like, oh, I didn't know that school was that competitive that someone would pay like hundreds of thousands of dollars to get into it. And so it makes them seem even more exclusive, which is kind of crazy to think about it.
My name is Thanasi, 18, co-founder of CU. I think my 3 words would be hilarious, backwards, and bubble. And I think it was just funny watching, like, imagine you're the kid and you're like, oh yeah, pose in this pool with this water polo ball. But I didn't know my parents were trying to sneak me into college. Like, I was just laughing the entire time. But I also think it's really funny how the documentary also had you thinking like the schools were not at fault. It really did not like say, well, Stanford probably shouldn't have kept the thousands of dollars that they got. But it was just interesting to me how they framed it, that it was all the parents' fault and that the colleges were just like mostly oblivious in this happening. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Angel. I am 19 and I am a first year at Yale. And 3 words, a phrase that I would associate with this documentary after watching it. 3 words, 2 words, 2 words. Meritocracy myth. Yeah, I think that one's pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's so funny that whenever people are applying, there's this narrative that, oh, if you work hard, you'll be rewarded by getting into these top schools. No, if you have money, you can very much bypass that system. So
I'm Crystal.
So my name is Crystal. I'm 17 and a high school senior from Texas. My 3 words are surprising, but not. The document took on a perspective I was surprised by because I've never explored it before.
For sure. All of those definitely hit close to home. And there are a couple ways I feel like we could go, but does anyone else have any questions or provocations that can get us started? Maybe, maybe not.
I guess I kind of just want to like start at the beginning and like, did you all before watching the film think that it was like this extensive and like uh, this much of a problem, or do you think it was like only a couple of people who paid their way into college? Because I kind of had the opinion that I used to like have friends at Columbia because I live in New York City, and they always used to be like, yeah, like one of my friends has his name on a building, and I was like, oh, that's funny, but I didn't really think that happened very often. And then after watching that, I kind of had my like paradigm a little bit shifted.
I think like this specific example I wasn't familiar with where you literally pay a guy to like help get you in. I think it's much more common and something I'm familiar with to either like be super wealthy and like pay just like tens of millions of dollars, or another thing which the documentary touched on slightly, which is just being wealthy enough to give your kids like a bunch of extra steps ahead, which isn't directly paying to get into your college, but in every way besides that basically is. So I'm definitely more familiar with that type than paying Rick to get your child to make your child an athlete.
Yeah, it just kind of confirmed my belief that if you have the money, then going into like a quote elite school is basically like a straight headway. There's not really that much trouble when you have that money.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that the ACT is like a great example. Like taking the ACT, I was like, there's no way that people don't like cheat on this. Like, there's no way that people are not somehow finding like someone's like proctor their test and like take it for them, or like they're somehow cheating. And same with like college admission stuff. I was like, there's absolutely no way that there's all these like super rich people who are not finding a way to like cheat their way into the system. And so this just kind of validated a lot of my assumptions.
Yeah, same here with Madison. I feel like college, like everything else in life, is an unlevel playing field. And specifically when it came to the testing example, this is a bit tangential, Miriam, so you don't have to write this down, but I was just very irked. I knew it happened, but I was just very irked, considering the fact that there are so many people who don't have the money to go, who have disabilities, who can't go and get those diagnoses that for those accommodations that will actually help them, that will actually help to like level the playing field for them just a little bit. But then we have these people, the Rick Singers of the world, the families that go to Rick Singer, who use their exorbitant amount of wealth to gain testing accommodations for a test that they don't really need them for. You can like pay thousands of dollars for a college prep program, an SAT prep program, an ACT prep program, and yet still go this way. I don't know. I was so many isms in this movie.
On that point, and like to Madison, your question of like, how do they not realize that like most of the special accommodations people are rich? I have a feeling that the entire system, the SAT, ACT system, they have to know that they're monopolies, right? They have to like accept that fact. And so I have a feeling that they probably knew that there was some sketchy stuff going on. But if they were to call out the sketchy stuff, they would totally break the trust in their system. And so like like obviously I would have loved to have someone take the SAT for me. I don't have that much money, but like I feel like they just don't, I feel like they knew and just didn't care.
I think it also varies by like geography and kind of like where you come from. I wasn't really aware of like external help until I kind of ran into some kids from Florida, and they're kind of like from an urban area. So they began talking about the existence of feeder schools, and um, a friend said that he paid 10K for like a college counselor. So that's nowhere near Rick Singer, but that's still like a significant investment. And then I was reading like a New York Times article recently, and I came across one article that was like showing the grievances of extracurriculars going away due to COVID. And then there was like another one talking about how, due to the loss of extracurriculars, um, families that were wealthy enough were sending their kids to boarding school so that they can continue doing sports.
That's a great point, Shahi. Like, I know in Chicago, a lot of the public schools were closed during COVID. And so just like all the rich families decided to send their kids to private schools who were able to stay open. And it was just like such a huge show of like the wealth disparities, especially in like urban cities like Chicago. And it was just like so apparent, but like nobody cared to do anything about it, which I think we were touching on a little bit throughout this whole thing.
Can I pose a question?
Go for it.
Okay, what is something new that people discovered while you were watching Varsity Blues?
Um,
Go
oh,
ahead.
no, you can go.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I did not know how involved like the coaches were. 'Cause I didn't really follow the Felicity Huffman thing very much, and so when I learned that like the coach at Yale and like the guy at Stanford, that's a question that I want to ask you. Do you think that the Stanford coach, do you think he was just dumb and used, or do you think he actually knew what was going on the entire time? Because that was a fierce debate I got in with my friends.
I feel like I don't know. I kind of had issue a little bit with the way the documentary, mockumentary, whatever you want to call it, portrayed the Stanford coach. Portrayed the Stanford coach as if he was this blameless guy who got duped in, who had really good intentions about helping other. I don't know. I feel like that in and of itself, it's just you can't be involved in such an elaborate scheme and not get an inkling as to what is possibly going on. Like, I just think it's impossible. And if he didn't know, that was ignorance by design, by his own design. But I'm very much leaning towards like he knew, like he knew.
I thought that there was like a strange parallel of like herd mentality and groupthink between the community of coaches and like the community of clients. I feel like the coaches had normalized sketchy donations in a way that it felt like FOMO. And then that was like the same with the clients. They felt like if they didn't do this, their child would be missing out on an opportunity.
Can I comment on like how okay, like I wouldn't these parents are not top criminals, but how are they not smart enough to not do communication over the phone? Like that's 101.
I mean, when their kids can't like get above 1,000 on the SAT, I wonder how smart they are. Because it's like if you have to like if you're all if like someone said that it would cost like $10,000 to $20,000 to do test prep, I don't think any amount of test prep would have gotten those dumb kids anywhere.
Okay,
I
so
think
this.
what I
Oh,
was
go ahead.
surprised by, sorry, I mean, I think what I was surprised by was just like how much weight people put on these colleges. Like, I mean, like these parents were already like really successful. Like their kids would have been fine even if they like didn't go to an Ivy League college. And so like why would you risk so because I guess when I think about I just I just think about how much they sacrifice and how much they risk just for the possibility of them attending the school and I'm like, well, like do the benefits even outweigh the costs?
Yeah, so this is obviously a hypothetical question, a provocation, but your kids and college admissions. I just want to see just like you can answer this in whatever way you want, but I'm thinking like, when it comes time for like your kid to like apply to college, like would you like send them, like would you get them like a college counselor if you had the means? Like how would you interact with the system, and just like so many different things like that. So that's my provocation.
This is really funny. My neighbor was a college counselor, and when all of this broke out, I had a really good conversation with her about what she does. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. What a college counselor does, if it isn't, even though they're debatable whether or not it's ethical in the first place, but if what the college counselor is doing is more ethical than the others, there's absolutely no reason to pay. You could really do that entire process yourself. And I honestly think get to the same place that you, I guess, did with the college counselor by your own accord. I don't know. So no, I will not be doing that.
I will say I didn't have a college counselor. Like I used uh just like a public resource where I got an advisor to help me, because college advisors do help when it comes to first generation students and just like first generation American students who are not very like clear with how American education or even the college process works, because that even comes with students with parents who have gone to college or who have been born here. Like they're confused about the entire college process, and that's terrible, because it means that in high school we're not even we're not setting them up to succeed in the college process. And so it gives students who are able to afford those like actually good college counselors step up on the college process. And like that's something that I read where I think okay, I can't remember, don't quote me on this, but I think only 8% of high achieving low income students applied to colleges the same way as higher income students. And that's a terrible percentage.
Yeah. What I could be wrong here, but wasn't the SAT like developed to just be a low key racist way of college admissions than a high key way of just not accepting black people? I could be totally wrong there, but I feel like someone just wanted to not accept black people, but they were like, "Oh, we got to do it in a fancy way," and so they made the SAT.
I think that like it was originally like created as like an equalizer from like what I've read, but it's obviously has definitely evolved from that. But like to answer this provocation, I've been thinking about it. And I think that like what I really appreciate about my parents is like they didn't really understand anything about the college process, because like they went to like community college, so like they don't really like didn't like I don't know about all the specifics and stuff. So like by accident it was kind of like everything was like initiated by me. And so I think that's kind of like the approach that I would take with my kids, is like letting them initiate, like if they like I don't know, like Ashley mentioned Google in the chat, like that is like so useful if they're like, oh, can I like go to this like prep camp or whatever, like just like letting them initiate the process and not putting that like pressure on them, like I'm expecting this out of you or that or whatever, saying you have to do this, because I think that's like a lot of like what happened in this situation. It's like just the parents. I mean, Olivia Jade was the perfect example. It's like the parents are like, you have to go to USC. She's like, that's not really what I want. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely understand on like a human instinctual level why these parents are doing what they do. Like they just want the best for their kid, and they think that, and there's also like a keeping up with the Joneses element to it. Like, oh, so and so's kid has like a private college counselor and they're going to like Russian math and they're doing all of this. If I'm not doing that for my kid, then like I'm not doing the best that I can. So there's such, and it's so like visceral. It's so, it gets like right to the core of like parenting instincts and things like that. But it's just so terribly, like it's just does such terrible things. with the way like our society is set up, basically, that only the very wealthy are able to do that, and it just continually makes this gap. It was very incoherent, but yes.
I have another hypothetical. If you were in the position where your kid was like middle of the line smart, right? But you could pay someone like what's his name? I totally forgot his name. But you could pay for them to get into college, like a really good school, like the school they wanted to, and they put so much, like their entire self-worth was getting onto these like great schools and being with their friends and all that stuff. Because like that's how it is on most kids anyway, right? Your self-worth is kind of based on your college admissions for a little bit. So would you do it? Would you pay if you had the means? Would you pay for your kids' happiness?
I think sorry, making my thoughts cohesive. Yeah, no, I think if we had the means, right, there would be absolutely no difference between my college, my child going to like an elite institution versus like a mid-tier institution, whatever that distinction means. I feel like the only reason, or one of the primary reasons that I guess elite, and actually, you know what? No, I'm sticking. Yeah. I know for a lot of kids that I hang around with, like FGLI students, first generation low income, the reason that they chose to go to the school that they're going to is for like that upward economic mobility. If we had the means to do so, there would be no reason, or there would be no need to have like that upward, like that mobility, because we're already there. You know what I mean? So no, it's not worth it at the end of the day.
I think that it would be kind of misguided to assume that you're doing it for the happiness of your child, because you can also like ask like, are you doing it for your kid or are you doing it for yourself? You're kind of like living vicariously through them. And so I would definitely stray away from it, because it also kind of perpetuates like things that are very cosmetic and artificial. But I understand it, because just like the education system itself, there's a lot of performance pressure. Like we have to measure performance by grades and concerts, races, and tournaments. But then with the system, we really get into like that mindset of like the end justifies the means. And I feel like that's where exploitation gets normalized, and then virtue and human dignity loses meaning.
Also, Crystal, I saw that you wanted to put something in the chat. So first of all, Jahi, so well put. So that was like incredible. Great answer to that. Does anyone have anything that they want to respond to in terms of the question or what Jahi said? Otherwise, we can move on to Crystal's question. All right. So I will paste this in, but you all can take a look at the chat if you'd like. For the viewers who are not here, it says the parents are applying to college. The kid is a vehicle through which they apply to college. To what extent is this statement true? So what are y'all's thoughts on that?
I think it's true in like very high class families where status means a lot and like they're paying for status and they're paying for the signaling. But I think in my experience, like I went to a school with 1,000 kids and I don't remember a day of my senior year before like we got shut down that was not filled with kids stressing out over like one or two words in their college apps. And maybe they were doing that because of pressure from their parents. Maybe that played a part in it. But I think a lot of young people have derived their self-worth from what colleges they get into and what scores they get. And that's a problem with society. And so I think the statement like the college is the way that young people prove their worth to society is probably true with every kid. But I think the like kid is a vehicle through which they apply to college kind of only applies to parents who are just very showy and in that realm where there's no other status symbol you can achieve other than my kid got into like X school.
I mean, to that point, I think all parents, I mean, like, that's probably a generalization, but most parents are driven by status signaling. I think that's just like human nature, right? Like, we compare ourselves to others and we want to be the best. I don't think it's just like elite parents. Like, I think about like even, I don't know, like in my immigrant community, like I don't know, I just think status plays like such a big role in just how people act. But I definitely really agree with the statement that like the kid is the vehicle through which to apply to college. I think like at the end of the day, like parents just want to see their kids realize their full potential and do everything that they themselves couldn't, right? And so like the kids are living out the dreams that the parents had for themselves. I mean, and like I don't see a lot of cases where that isn't what is happening.
Speaking from like my own experience of the college process this past year, I got into the school I wanted to go to and like will be going to like pretty early on before all of like the applications for all these other schools are in. And it was but I didn't commit to it for a long time because I was going back and forth with myself and with my parents about whether I should apply to other schools and see if I get in, and maybe I'd like those better. And I'm conscious of what I'm saying because one of my parents is in the other room and I don't want to like diss too much, but I don't think they'll care. It is definitely a conversation about, you know, both my parents went to this school and they really liked it there and they thought it would be a good school for me, and I like the school, but it just, part of the conversation was definitely also about, you know, like you could get into this place and it's prestigious, and you know, as much as my family has tried really hard to not play into that, it's so difficult to remove yourself from that space that everyone's in, because as much as we don't want to care about these things, it's so difficult. Like if you get into like Harvard, but that's not the right school for you, it's so hard to turn down because like it's Harvard. And so it was so difficult for so long for me and my parents, who are also in this with me, which is like, because they also, an extent, I guess, are like applying to college, to like take ourselves out of that and say, no, this is like the school for me. I want to go here, and I'm going to tear myself out of this like weird orbit of prestige. Anyways, that was a long-winded way of saying I think it's true, but I think, you know, it can be changed, and I'm really lucky to have parents which I can talk to about these things.
On the opposite side of the spectrum, I think we could also consider like these quantifiable marks of achievement as like thank you gifts that children of first generation immigrants can return for their parents who just went through incredible sacrifice. So in that sense, I guess that's like an optimistic way to view it, but yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true. To the upward mobility point that Angel made, I think that like it's a huge way to give back to like both my parents came here and didn't know what college was, all that stuff, and so it's like, hey, look what I did that you really try to work hard for. But I feel like it's become too much of a social pressure on kids.
Yeah, I think oh, sorry, who am I interrupting?
No, go ahead.
No, Madison, go ahead.
It was a question, so seriously.
Okay, no, I think my experience definitely parallels that of Ashley's. I think immigrant communities are very rife with comparison, specifically comparing their children amongst each other. And once again, when your family comes from a place that isn't as fortunate as the US, there's a tendency to like instill that onus, or not that onus, but this practice of hard work within your child. And I guess as a society, we've kind of synonymized the epitome of hard work to be admission into these quote unquote prestigious colleges. So when you have the opportunity to get in and or to go, it's definitely seen as, specifically on the child as well, as a way to give back to your parents for everything that they've done. But at the same time, you're definitely stuck in this weird space where, is this really something that I want to do for myself, or is this something that my parents want in order to compare within their communities, or to claim that their child was actually like a success story? I don't know. So I do think that to some extent, this is definitely true.
Something
Yeah,
I'll add to that is, sorry, just really quickly. Something I'll add to that is that I think a lot of, I mean, like, I guess in my experience, a lot of immigrant families are just looking for security. Like, you know, like it's hard to feel like you belong in a place like that you moved to, and so like going to an elite American university is literally like the best way to like solidify your spot here and like to feel that sense of security. And so I don't know, that's what I think about.
Okay, so this whole conversation around self-worth is really interesting. And so my question would be like, if kids don't derive their self-worth from college, like where else are they supposed to like derive it from in like like how society is today?
So I'm answering the previous question. I posed the previous question because like the one thing, the documentary that was so surprising to me was that it talked about the parent's perspective. And like, you know, I have my mom, right? And so, but she's never really been in the college process. Like, it's just been, hey, every college is the same. So if you go to one college, whether it's Harvard or your community college, you made it. And so I didn't really feel pressured by her or my family to go to like an elite school. Like, but then I would see other people, other students stressing out and saying like, oh my gosh, I need to get into Yale or Columbia or Harvard. And so that's one of the things that I didn't really derive. Okay, I guess this is going into the other question. I didn't really derive my self-worth from college because of that. Because my parent never really told me like, hey, you need to get into the school. She just said like, hey, if you get an education, that's better than me, because I didn't even graduate high school. And I was like, all right, cool. So I suppose like where you could derive your self-worth is just making sure that you have the ability to tell yourself that you did your best in achieving success, whatever way you define it, whether it's happiness or I don't know, getting a job. Like I know that's that's where I'm getting my self-worth, because I want to like make sure that I get a good job and take my family out of poverty.
I mean, I also feel like it's, I don't know, I just get sad when I think about like the fact that we have to do something to like prove our self-worth, or like it seems like we like have to accomplish something, or like I don't know, it's like why can't people just be worthy, like just for the fact that they like have feelings and they have ideas and they have dreams and they're like here and breathing, like why can't that be a thing?
I think that the idea of self-worth is so hard, especially now with technology and just social media and constantly being compared to others every second of your life, whether it be your parents or whatever. And I also think that I'd venture to say most humans right now derive their self-worth by attaching themselves to something bigger so that they don't have to define it themselves. So, because defining your self-worth is super hard. And I have by no means done it, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But I just feel like, you know, wearing a college sweatshirt attaches you to a college that is perceived as smart by a lot of people. So therefore you are perceived as smart. Therefore you don't have to do a lot of work. Attaching yourself to a job, being like all these people that put Forbes 30 under 30 in their LinkedIn bio, Gary, attaches you to a cohort of people who people assume you're smart, so you don't have to do a lot of things. Yeah, like Google people. You like how many people flex that they work at Google just because, it, like, so I feel like we don't set kids up to be able to understand their self-worth and like work through it. I can't wait to get fired and work through it in schools. Like we always quantify them with GPAs or SAT scores, and we're constantly quantifying them with things that are very monolithic. And so I think it's just a huge systemic issue that I don't know what the solution is for.
Yeah, talking about quantification, I think that just the society in general has taught us that everything is also transactional. And just like the language that we use, like pay the price, beauty is pain, hard work pays off. And I feel like it's, and just like even the word human race, it seems strange. I feel like we could call ourselves like a human ecosystem instead. What comes around goes around, even karma.
I love that point, even down to like the language that we use, like influences. That's such a good point. And yes, Jaehee podcast, so so down. Jaehee, please do. And I think this is all we have time for in terms of questions. So does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to this question, or last minute thoughts that they like need to get out about Operation Varsity Blues that have just been burning to say since you watched it?
I have one thing, but it's just because I watched it with like most of my friends go to Barnett and Columbia, so I watched it with them, and it was good getting their perspectives on how the documentary portrayed the Ivies, because I think the Ivies get a lot of shit for being Ivies and just people who want to shit on higher education. And so I think that the documentary made it very easy to portray everyone that went to these schools, including a lot of like low-income first-generation students, as people who have bought their way in or got in for affirmative action, and like totally just destroy the achievement that is an Ivy League school. And I just wonder if that's like a healthy alternative too. You know what I mean? Like you either build them up and they're the best thing ever, or they're like shit and everybody who goes there bought their way in. And I don't know. I don't think those should be the only two options.
Yeah, and also just like the fact that like somewhere during that movie, they were like, yeah, Ivy League schools like aren't even that good. You could get the same resources at like a state school or a community college, and that's just like not true. Like I don't believe that. Like yeah, like that's just like blatantly like not true. And so like I guess I'm also wondering like is it? I mean like it's also like it's almost like they're like discouraging people from like reaching for it. Like I don't know. I just thought that was really off.
So
Yeah,
these, oh, sorry, Madison, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Okay. It was just one thing that stuck with me since, and this isn't like a serious thing at all, but at the end of the documentary, it was like Stanford maintains that like they don't consider any money in admissions, and that was so funny that I laughed out loud. That was the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. Just sorry, can I swear? Just such bullshit. I was like, yeah, okay, that's it.
Yeah, Leora, to that point, I've seen things where like universities have preference to wealthier applicants, not just if they give donations, but if they have the ability to pay full tuition. So it's like, oh, we don't have to give them as much aid. But what I was gonna say is like it's so easy to criticize people. Like you could literally find any reason you want to like criticize people's success. Like if someone is like if you know someone who's wealthy who got into college, you're like, oh, they only got in because they got the resources. If you know someone who's like not as privileged, it's like, oh, they got in because of their like lower income or whatever. Any number of things. And I feel like that's just like so applicable here, and I felt like that's something that I see a lot and that I saw played throughout the documentary as well.
Yeah, and I just want to like tack on to Ashley's point as well. I think I feel like in a way, Operation Varsity Blues, and maybe this is an issue that could be considered inherent to like the design of the documentary itself, but I feel like it kind of scapegoated Rick Singer and those parents who connive to get their children into these elite institutions through the side door, and made it seem as if all of the ailments of the college admissions process was somewhat solved by them getting their like 2-month long sentences and by paying their $10,000 fines. I feel like the movie didn't necessarily address the true systemic issues of what makes like the American meritocracy myth like a myth. Colleges are not built the same, and that quite frankly is just true. HBCUs, for instance, don't have as much resources as T20s or T10s, and that's extremely unfortunate. That is extremely unfortunate, but it is unfortunately true. So if we want to stop like bouncing between this duality of, oh, you go to XYZ college, F you, or oh my God, you must be so smart, you know what I mean? If we want to stop like doing that very two-step waltz, then we need to figure out ways to systemically address the root of the issue, invest into underserved communities. Let's honestly get rid of standardized testing. I said it. It needs to go. It needs to end. There are just so many issues that need to be addressed that I feel like aren't entering the public conversation, especially that disability point.
For sure. Those are all really, really good points. And I think this is a perfect time to transition into our reflection. So I'm going to go ahead and paste the link in the chat. And then Gary, is it shared so that everyone can see it?
Yep. Yeah, it's shared.
Perfect. Okay. The link is in the chat for all of you to take a look at. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to say, like, there are so many things that I still have to say about this documentary. Like, it was totally crazy. And like, one of the points that we kind of touched on but didn't really go into as much was just like the idea that at the end of the documentary, they were like, well, this is all really bad, but at the end of the day, these institutions look even more desirable just because like people are willing to do so much and like risk jail time or like fines even to just like get into these schools. And I feel like it kind of just like said that at the very end, just a quick little end card. And I was like, there's a lot more to be said about this whole entire issue. And back to like what Angel and everyone was talking about with like the systemic issues that nobody really seems to want to address. And just like the whole societal discourse around this issue is like extremely problematic, and no one kind of wants to like take a stab at dismantling all of that. But I think it's just more to think about for the future. But does anyone want to go ahead and get started with their own reflection?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So I thought that this conversation really showed how vulnerable the education system is, and then those who exploit it. It was kind of like they were playing like a game of Jenga. But throughout this conversation, there were so many great points made. I feel like this can be a really great starting point for us to look at how we can systemically reform the system.
Yeah. I'm just like reflecting on like the nature of this documentary and how this conversation went, and it's making me think that I don't think this documentary is gonna like push much like societal change or like systemic change in the college admission system. It's one of those things where it really just validated a problem that everyone already knew existed, right? Like in this conversation, we talked a little bit about like the documentary itself, but we really just talked about the issue at large, and we already all had experience with it. And as opposed to like something like Seaspiracy, I don't know if you all have seen that documentary, but it basically reveals like everything in the fishing industry that is like so wrong, and like that has I see documentaries like that as having the potential to change people's like minds and change things because it's bringing up an issue that people don't already understand. So yeah, well, I think media is powerful. I don't know if this would really do much or if it brought much new things to the table. Even though I did enjoy it, it really just like validated what we all already knew was happening.
I think on that point, I also just think that this college admissions scandal and just the entire process is just a symptom of the lack of like the self-worth and image issues that young people have and just everybody has in society. So I think it's just like there's a much larger problem, and this is just like a little pimple on the face of humanity. And yeah, I don't think the documentary is going to change anything either. I just think again, I had a lot of laughs at these poor unathletic kids like trying to act like water polo players. It was just so funny.
I guess this is kind of like tangentially related to what Madison and Tanasi are getting at. Like, I think they're both right in saying it is just not going to bring forth societal changes. This one documentary isn't going to change anything, but I do think it's doing a good job of, I guess, what any good piece of art or media does, which is stoke conversation, and that's exactly what we're doing. And more conversation is better. So I'm glad that the documentary was made in that sense. Would I have made all of the artistic and stylistic choices that they made and chose to focus on things that they did? No. But I do think overall, I'm glad that it was made. I'm glad that we're having these discussions.
Honestly, watching this documentary, very funny an experience. I think afterwards, after this conversation, specifically after watching the documentary, the 5 minutes that I took to digest everything, I was reminded of the lawsuit that the Trump administration filed against Yale for affirmative action, for preferencing or disadvantaging, yes, that's the word, disadvantaging white students, which I thought was just extremely hilarious. And it's just so interesting seeing how POC FGLI students are scapegoated in this issue, whereas other students with more wealthy means of getting into college are accepted as if they belong there. But as we all know, Olivia Jay did not deserve to get her spot in USC. And there are, quite frankly, I don't want to use the word deserve. That's icky. But there are some students that find a way easier time getting into these institutions than others. And the people who have fought tooth and nail to get where they are, whether it be academically or just through different life experiences that some people privilege protect them from, are constantly like bombarded with this, or not bombarded, but ostracized and almost alienated from like this culture that pervades elite institutions. And it was just very funny to see that contrast. Yeah, I think that's my reflection.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I guess like my reflection usually like even though like this documentary like yes it revealed a scandal and like I guess to that end it was I don't know good for the public. I honestly feel like it served more to like fracture people and like pit people against each other than like to acknowledge that like something is wrong with the education system and we like need to do something about it. I mean I watched it with my parents and like they couldn't relate to the film at all and I just feel like well like who is this targeted towards and like what do people feel when they're watching this because if you are like Richard and watching this you're like oh like I can't relate because like what if I actually worked really hard or like I don't know I just feel like it didn't do enough to like help bring people together and have and like into dialogue it just really served to like alienate people from each other and see the other person as like the evil person or like they're just like not doing yeah I don't know.
This talk was very like when I saw it, like not gonna lie, I laughed super hard at some points, and then I also cried super hard at some points because it did reaffirm like some of my thoughts, especially when it came to like, you know, it's easier for rich people to get into these higher institutions, but it also brought into the perspective of parents when it comes to wanting their kids to go into these institutions, and then also like just kids who like the scene where kids were crying because they didn't get accepted to their schools, the contrast with that compared to kids who did get accepted, it kind of like it hit home because I knew that these kids were thinking I didn't do enough, when in reality you could do your absolute best, you could do the exact same as somebody else, but you won't get accepted just because there's not enough seats. And I think not enough people realize that.
For sure. That's a great point. And I think that like something that was just such a stark contrast was that girl, she was crying and she's like, I'm sure that people that got into USC were so deserving. And then they flashed like Olivia Jade and she's like, I curl my falsies and then my normal lashes. And I was like, oh my God, that was really quite a moment. The film directors did her a little bit dirty there, but it was just like kind of like a heartbreaking for the people that actually didn't get in and had like worked super hard. So definitely great point, Crystal, and great points to like all of that. I feel like I hadn't even really evaluated the documentary as something that like stoked conversation or what type of conversation it did stoke, because for me it's just like this is a nice little outlet after the college applications to be like, hey, this is what people are doing to get in, so it's all right. But I thought this was a really good conversation. And I know all of you have been to treks before, so this isn't your first time, but it is our first time, I think, discussing a piece of media. So how did it go for all of you? Did y'all enjoy talking about the documentary? Any and all thoughts appreciated.
Mariam, I will say that you did an amazing job and cannot wait to have you host another trek. It was great. And I think that the media is so like it's just like an amazing thing, because a lot of times we'll pick a topic and we'll all be on different pages and it takes us a while to kind of like nail down a definition, like understand where we're all working from. And so it's really great to have this shared context to kind of lay the foundation for the conversation, and then just like let us go from there.
For sure. And thank you so much. And all of y'all in the chat for hyping me up. Very much appreciated. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad you all enjoyed. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
Just a thought. I feel like we should pick some like a documentary or something next time and try to get one of the directors or someone who's in it like to join a trek, because I feel like we probably could. I don't think it'd be that much of an ad. Like I doubt many people are asking the director of Varsity Blues to come on anything, so
Yes, I think that's a great idea. At G Money, maybe add that in the notes. Perfect. I love that. I think it'll be really cool, and maybe it'll get more people to watch it and participate and wanna do it because it seems pretty cool. But love that. Anyone else? Okay, well, if not, thank you all so much for coming on this trek with me. I really enjoyed it and it was a really, really good experience. Thanks to all of you. So I hope you all have a great rest of your night and rest of your week, and I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.